just uploaded this version of the PowerPoint into Canvas, so you have it available in your modules. So if you want to take notes, go ahead, but everything here is also in your modules. These are the publisher's objectives. I just left them. Okay, the history. We always got to talk about the history of punishment. Because it's so interesting. How we used to punish people for doing things they shouldn't do. Historically, people who violated the law were considered morally corrupt and in need of strong discipline. In early Greece, Rome, the most common state-administered punishment was banishment or exile. Greece and Rome, if you're taking history, is the seed of our governments, okay, where we got democracy from. And to this date, we kind of still follow the same type of protocols. During that era, if you offended the community, you were banished. You weren't allowed to live among them. You had to go and form your own tribes and be off on your own. During the Middle Ages, people found guilty of crimes faced a wide range of punishment. Very creative punishment. Torture, branding, whipping, death. And they got very creative on how they put people to death. And if I find the short clip of it, I used to show, kind of like a 30-minute version, the history of punishment, and some of the things they did to people was gruesome. If I find a smaller version of it, I'll show it on Wednesday. The main emphasis of criminal law and punishment was to maintain public order. Today, currently, the main emphasis on criminal behavior and punishment is somewhat maintaining order, but the emphasis has transitioned into modifying behavior. We don't want these criminals to be criminals anymore, but we're not giving up on them. We want to modify behavior, and we do that through rehabilitative type programs. So through the history, the evolution, it has changed. You notice here, historically, incapacitation is not listed up there. They did not lock people away. That's relatively new. A few hundred years old, actually. The development of the common law in the 11th century brought some standardization to the penal practices. Common law, meaning you should know better than to do something. It doesn't have to be written down. You should know better. You know better than to steal from somebody. If it's not yours, you leave it. You know better than to kill someone because it's wrong, morally wrong. At the end of the 16th century, many offenders were made to do hard labor for their crimes. We're getting into restitution, making right for your wrong. If you did something to your neighbor, you say you stole from their crop, regardless of your reasons or motivations, it didn't matter. You would go before, they call it the shiree, I believe, which is the modern version of the sheriff. And they would tell you, well, to repay your debt, you're going to have to go work for this person. X amount of hours, X amount of days, whatever it is, until you make it right. And that's restitution, making someone who was wrong whole again. In England, transporting convicts to the colonies became popular, and then by 1820, long periods of incarceration in walled institutions called reformatories or penitentiaries began to replace physical punishment in England and in the United States. It started, and if you look in your text, Wall Street, there was 3 prisons, the Pennsylvania, Wall Street, and Auburn. I think the Auburn system is the other one. The silent, they weren't allowed to talk. They weren't allowed to congregate. It was very strict how they did the incarceration at that time. You did not want to go to prison. But that wasn't until about 1820. So a couple hundred years is when that idea started in the colonies. We shouldn't be torturing people We should not be cutting hands off and fingers off and their tongues or branding them, putting them in stockades to be publicly humiliated. That's not acceptable. We're civilized. Let's just lock them up. Put them in a cage. Great idea. The goals. These are the modern objectives. Let's see which ones matter. Looks like the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About 5 or 6 bullets on the last one are the ones that you're going to be tested on. Everything except diversion and equity and restitution. General deterrence, specific deterrence. It's a method of deterring unacceptable behavior. I think the slides are going to talk about it. Yeah, here we go. General deterrence. People should be punished to set an example for others. Should be proportionate and fair, and the effect is less than desired. You're being punished for something you did wrong, but to set an example for others so that they also will be deterred from a similar crime. The one that always comes to the forefront in the discussion is the death penalty. If you tell this person they're being sentenced to death because of their crime, the idea is others in the community will not do this type of a crime because they don't want to be put to death. General deterrence. They should have talked about specific. Where we go? I'm going to skip and go to specific. Specific deterrence is different because in specific, the intent is designed only for the offender, not to set an example for others. So there's 2 types of deterrences, specific and general. Okay, specific, the experience of suffering punishment should inhibit future law violations for the offender. To convince offenders that the pains of punishment are greater than the potential benefit of the crime. Hedonistic calculus. Mixed results in the research regarding effectiveness. Mixed results. I'll flat out tell you it doesn't work. Okay? It doesn't work. And there's evidence to support that. Just look at the overcrowding in prisons. They've redone the penal code just to correct the overuse of incapacitation. That's not always the answer. Locking people up is not always the answer. So specific deterrence, intended for the offender, not so much to set an example. This offender has committed several violations of the law. They're drug traffickers. It's profitable. They don't care about the penalty because the incentive is so high. That's hedonistic calculus. You calculate the benefit versus the punishment, and you say it's worth it, or it's not. In this case, it is. Because they're only getting maybe 1 year in county. They're out again. And what research has proven, they become a better criminal. They learn how to not get caught. Not how to stay away from selling drugs. They learn how to not get caught. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so that's deterrence, specific and general. Incapacitation. I backed up one slide. Incapacitation pretty much just lock people up. Preventing crime by keeping offenders under state control, locking them up. Evidence is mixed. Other factors that have influence the makeup of the population. Who are we putting in these prisons? The effectiveness of the police to incarcerate the right people for the right amount of time. Are we doing a good job? Are we doing it correctly? The drug use and the economy and the effects definitely diminish over time. I started a long time ago, before any of you guys heard before. And in the prison, an inmate had no rights. If I wanted to put hands on an inmate, I could. If I wanted to lock them up, throw them in the hole, I could. If I felt like feeding them, I would. If they pissed me off, I wouldn't. If they really ticked me off, I'd turn off their lights, shut off their water, and they sit in the dark. Treat them like a mushroom. Not bad. Does that sound like a place you'd want to be? Where no way. Your entire existence is dependent on whether that officer feels like feeding you or turning on your lights. Definitely a deterrent. I'm not going to be there. Because they would sit there and snivel. You have to do this, you have to do that. Go home. You shouldn't be in prison. Stay home next time if you don't like the way I'm treating you. Well, a lot of things happened after that. Because that isn't right either, okay? I get it. But it definitely wasn't a place where you wanted to be. Now, because of so many case lawsuits that were filed by inmates because of this type of treatment, and like I said, it was wrong, they've overcorrected. They created an inmate bill of rights. I can no longer just put hands on a person if I want to. I don't need probable cause, I just have to have a reason. I have to make sure they have adequate lighting. They receive specific types of food, which is evaluated by a nutritionist. It must have to meet certain sizes, quantities. The temperatures of the food have to be in a specific range. They have to be fed at a specific time. They have to have a specific type of a mattress, a pillow, running water, and a toilet. We wouldn't even give them a toilet. There was a hole in the floor. Oh, it gets better. Now they have access to libraries and programs, outside correspondence, contact visits, color TVs, radios, instruments. Some of them go to college. And that's okay, as long as they're doing their time and trying to rehabilitate. But when you're talking about these scumbags that are only in there to cause problems, then it gets difficult. It gets really difficult. So the incapacitation used to be a deterrent, was a place people did not want to go to. And the stigma, if they knew you were an ex-con, was pretty bad. Nowadays, show of hands, how many of you in this classroom are related to someone, know someone, are friends with someone that has done time in either a county or state prison? Please, show your hands. Not included. Okay, good. Over half. If we were to have asked this question 30 years ago, maybe one hand would have gone there. That's the effect it has. Incapacitation, the effect it has on our communities. It really does. It's no longer a place people fear. You don't want to go. I've dealt with people that are there intentionally. They want to earn their stripes, their bones, because they're gangbangers. They could say they did time in Folsom or Quentin. And it adds to their reputation. They get back out of the street, they're a better gang member, they're held in higher regard because they did their time. It's ridiculous. But that's what you guys are dealing with. So incapacitation, locking people up. The goals include retribution or just desert. This is a good one. It's in the Bible. An eye for an eye. You cause me harm, I am entitled to cause you equal harm. Punishment should fit the crime. Those who violate the rights of others deserve to be punished. Retribution. Eye for an eye. It's also called just desert. You get what you deserve. This is a good one. Rehabilitation is sort of where the judicial system is now. And I don't mind that we're trying to rehabilitate offenders. I think it's a good idea. I just think we're spending too much money on it and not spending money in other places like education. Yes?
What would be an example of retribution like in modern day?
Civil law. You see retribution a lot in civil law. Your neighbor was flying a drone, and they flew it right through your window, knocked over all your stereo, broke glass, caused thousands of dollars in damages. So you tell your neighbor, hey, you got to pay for the damages you caused. They say, I ain't paying you. You get the rest of that conversation, right? I'm not paying you anything. So you take them to court. You show the drone that was flown into your home, you show all the damages. Now you have to prove to the court that this person caused you harm. So the court will order restitution in the amount to pay you back for your damages, to make you whole again.
So it's retribution and restitution.
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, retribution specifically, you see that, and I hate to use this example, but it's in rape trials, sexual violence type of felonies. The case is presented to the court. The person, the offender is found guilty. The victim gets to stand at the podium and ask for retribution. I ask, Your Honor, that you throw the book at him. I'll never be the same. I mean, it gets really sad. And I told you, unfortunately, the judge don't care. But that would be asking for retribution. And in that rare occasion, if the judge does get influenced by that speech and says, you know, I think you're right. In addition to all the penalties I was going to issue, I'm going to put chemical castration on the table, specific for retribution. Okay? That kind of answer? Diversion. This isn't one of the pillars, but it's something you need to know. Aimed at sparing dangerous offenders from the stigma and labeling of criminal conviction for their involvement with the judicial process. Diverted to a community correction program for treatment. So in lieu of going to a jail or a state prison, you're a first-time offender, you've shown sincere remorse, you've convinced the court that you're willing to change, and they believe you. So instead of sending you into custody, they're going to send you to a diversion facility. And most of these are community correction facilities where you might just check in the evening at 6 o'clock. You check out in the morning so you can go to school if you're a juvenile, or you can go and maintain your employment. It's less of a stigma when you finish that program because it's not on your criminal record. So you don't have to disclose it to potential employers. One of my friends, he was a sergeant in Portland. Him and his wife were always at, I mean, these guys were terrible. Always fighting in public. It was uncomfortable being around them. He's at work, and there's no other way to say it. She's a hoe. She is. So she's screwing around while he's at work. He's at work. His name's Mike, by the way. This is a real story, not fabricated. I can't make this one up. He gets hurt at work, so he goes home. He comes in, he sees there's a vehicle parked out in front of the house, doesn't recognize it, walks in, and of course, when he was making noise, he said that this person ran out of the bedroom getting dressed. And so Mike confronted him, they had a few words, and Mike beat the living crap out of him. His wife comes out, they're arguing, you get the picture. The idiot comes to, gets outside, makes a phone call. All of a sudden, these squad cars are pulling up. Turns out he was an off-duty police officer for the city. Yeah. Off-duty police officer. Wow. Just got good, right? So he's taken into custody. He's arrested and charged with battery on a peace officer. Not cool. He goes all the way through the court. Now, this was small county. It's a small county. Everybody knows everybody. I happened to be in the courtroom. I wasn't on the case, but I was in the courtroom. Judge Atkinson was the judge. He knows the officer. He knows the officer's captain, the chief. He knows Mike, because Mike was on the squad. He used to transport these dangerous criminals to the court proceedings. So he knows everybody involved. Case is called. And the prosecutor called, they present their case, it was a prenup, they present their case. And the judge, God, you should have seen him. He's just shaking his head. He can't believe what these people are saying. They're lying, saying that he was in uniform and that Mike knew he was an officer and that, I mean, they made up all kinds of crap. So the defense gets to present its case. Rarely does the offender take the stand. It's a prelim, so he just answered questions from the bench. But he did make statements, and he convinced the judge that, exactly like I told you, he walked in and didn't know who this guy was. Beats the crap out of him. When it was all said and done, he's found guilty. And we knew he was going to be found guilty. He still beat the crap out of a cop. And instead of sending him to prison, though, they put him in a diversion program. This is what the judge came up with. 18 months of attending these, what the heck, you called it something. Anger management, there you go. Anger management classes. He had to complete this program. While he was completing the program, he wasn't allowed to be in uniform. But because the prison unit was going on, they didn't fire him. They just put him in the mailroom. It's like a punishment. Put him in the mailroom. He's not allowed to go inside, no contacts, because he can't carry a firearm. And so he was in the mailroom. At the end of the 18 months, he goes back to the court. Everything's expunged, which they knew it was going to be like it never happened. This officer was fired. They fired the chief because she knew what this guy was up to. He was no good. It could cause all kinds of problems. Good example of diversion, that it worked in this case. Mike thought he was going to lose his retirement, his job, everything, because they were lying, flat out lying, trying to protect their own behinds. Truth came out, justice was served. I like that story. Okay? And that guy could never have another job as a police officer. You don't do that. He knew she was married. He knew who her husband was. Mike didn't know. He didn't know what was going on. Yeah. But boy, did he have a rude surprise. That's pretty chicken shit. Yeah, that really is. But it all ended well. They stayed together for a little bit longer, and I think they're divorced. Happily divorced. Yeah. Okay, so that's diversion. And that's a good example of it working. Okay, let's see. As part of diversion, the convicted offender may be asked to make restitution for the crime, to participate in community-based programs that feature counseling. What types of nonviolent offenses do you think would fit with the goals of diversion? And are there any nonviolent offenses that you would believe aren't appropriate? Why not? Okay, I kind of give you an example. His was a violent, but because of the circumstances, they were able to still mitigate and use a diversion program. So it does work. Equity and restitution. As one of the pillars, we call it just restitution. We really don't get into the equity. This publisher, the author, liked the term equity. Any other class you sit in, you're going to see it as just the restitution. And I answered Ann's question, and I applied it in a civil setting, where restitution is the offender must pay for the damages. That does happen in felony cases, but not to the same degree as in a civil case. Okay, so the action or practice of awarding each person his or her own due seeks to compensate individual victims and the general society for their losses because of a crime. You're making a person whole. They've lost something. And because of those damages, you, the offender, are ordered to pay restitution. Doesn't always work. Restitution doesn't always work. But it's an effort to make a person whole again. General liability case. General liability, these vehicle manufacturers. And I love Ford, I drive a Ford. But Ford's done some pretty stupid things in their past. Yeah. And I'm thinking about the Ford Pinto. Yeah. Pinto. If anybody's ever heard of these little Pintos. Yeah. My aunt had one. These things were notorious that when rear-ended, they happened to put the fuel tank back in, they would explode. Yeah. Ford knew it, but did nothing about it. They figured it's cheaper to just address litigation after the fact than it was to do a massive recall. It was a business decision. So they allowed these vehicles on the street. They settled these cases, but in some instances, people's lives were lost. Or they were maimed, lost limbs, disabled. Now, if you're Ford and you're paying restitution, how much money is it going to take to make this person whole again for them losing a loved one? A spouse, a daughter, a close friend, a son, a brother. What dollar figure do you put on that? You can't. I lost my right arm because of this injury that they knew about. But how much money am I going to be awarded to compensate me for the loss of this life? I don't know. Insurance companies do know. They have more morality rates and other things.
Oh dear. In these sort of instances, I feel like retribution would be a better.
Yeah.
Because restitution, like, they can just throw money at them all they want.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of cases, like, I don't know of this one, but what was a different situation, but pretty much lost a loved one kind of deal. And like, they just throw a bunch of money at her, but then she just ended up getting worse and worse and worse because obviously she didn't have her, like, husband anymore, right? So I feel like retribution would probably, like, they should go to jail. They should get, if someone was lost, if the life was lost, they should get the death penalty or whatever it was for the life of the person. But those are criminal people that
Right.
people who decided.
Remember, who can bring the criminal allegation to the court? Only the government, not you as an individual. So you can't do that. Unless you use a class action and try to persuade some district to file criminal charges, and sometimes it happens, most of the time it doesn't. They let the civil courts deal with it. Civil courts do not have the authority to issue retribution, only restitution. So it's not ideal, but it's the best they can do. Throw money at the problem. And that's the way it happens.
That's what they have, so it doesn't really cost them anything.
Sometimes it does.
And so in criminal cases, in criminal courts, I know you can file for what's the next court?
The appeals.
The appellate court and the Supreme Court. Can you go for the same from civil courts as well? Appellate and all that?
And that happened with that McDonald's case where I don't like that one. I order a cup of coffee at McDonald's and I take a sip and I burn myself. So I'm going to sue McDonald's. And I don't know, they were awarded $1 million or $3 million in some suit. McDonald's says, come on. You know the case?
Yes, but it was more severe than that. I think she got first degree burns, like in her crotch
Spill?
area.
Okay.
So.
And there wasn't a top on the cup, right?
I'm
was
not
over.
sure, but it was like over temperature,
Okay.
over the safe temperature.
First degree burns. You can't fix stupid. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said it. You can't fix it. So how is a company, whether it's McDonald's, I'm not trying to defend them. I just think there has to be some personal ownership at some point. How is that their fault? That you spilt this hot coffee on your lap. Go ahead.
It was because it was over temperature by
Over
a lot,
temperature.
which is why they suffered the
So my coffee is over temperature, and I'm like but stupid enough to carry this and be careless and put it in my crotch and burn myself to the first degree. I'm not going to even tell anybody. I'm going to be so embarrassed. There's some still ownership. Because if you buy into that argument, right, then McDonald's should not even be in business because they make people overweight. We should not be allowed to use forks. Forks should be banished, anybody who manufactures them, because that's the instrument we use to kill ourselves with. Come on.
This is different though, because if it was so like hot that it literally burned, like made her hands melt into her legs, like that's way too hot. That's because the employees weren't doing their job in regulating the temperature of the coffee that they were giving.
And that's fine. Go ahead.
So
Also, the money was only to cover the medical bills.
Oh, no, they didn't know this. Because it did get to the appeal court. Look it up. It went to the appellate court, and the appellate court said this is ridiculous. Once you set that precedent, you imagine how many other lawsuits are coming?
I mean, I think, like you say, some do get out of control and they are really ridiculous. But I think in a case like that, only coming from like a customer, you would think maybe back then they are not where they are now, where they have like the proper lids, a little top, little Starbucks has a little green thing that you put on it so it doesn't spill. They have like that extra thing where like to put around, what is that thing that goes around the coffee so it's really extremely hot, like the sleeve, yeah. So there's like, back then they didn't have that, but as a business as big as McDonald's is, you would think that they would also do things
right on the
before
top, it says contents may be hot.
Yeah, but they didn't have that back then.
No, they didn't.
No. So
They didn't
obviously
have
they
it.
learned their lesson, and then now they moved out to where now there's.
Remember the Tylenol scandal? Anybody remember Tylenol? No. Let's go. I'll fast forward a little bit. If you buy a bottle of Tylenol, aspirins, anything off the shelf, how hard is it to take that lid off?
Press down, yes.
Press down, twist,
Or pinch.
or pinch. But there's some combination there, right?
Yeah.
Then once you get the lid off, what's next? What's the other barrier you got to get through?
Plastic, pull off the seal.
There's a seal, there's plastic, right? You have to pull that. Then once you break that, there's something else stuck inside.
Cotton.
Cotton sheet. You gotta get out of it. Right? I just drilled right off the damn top of these things sometimes. I can't get in. Why do you think they have all of that now?
Because they got sued for something else.
Lawsuits. Lawsuits. Now this one though, because of, and it was Tylenol, they didn't used to be like that. They would have the little containers, you just click the top off, take out whatever pills you wanted. People were poisoned. They were taking the top and they were putting poison in random Tylenol containers. Yeah. So the manufacturers thought, we got to do a better way to prevent that. There may have been specific lawsuits, I don't remember. But now that's one I do support because anybody can tamper with that type of medication. But I'm sorry, somebody burning themselves with hot beverage, I'll never buy that it was intentional, because there has to be some responsibility. The liability has to be proven. That McDonald's, I don't like McDonald's either, but that they intentionally brewed this coffee to this temperature to cause someone harm. There has to be intent. And they did prove it. Initially, they did prove it at a civil court. Remember what the level of proof is in a civil court. Anybody remember that?
5149.
Preponderance? People think 49, but if you have perfectly balanced scales and you put one grain of sand, that's it. You just got to believe it a little bit more than you don't. That's the level of proof required in a civil proceeding. That's why they got the award that they did. Okay, so restitution. You make someone whole again. It's supposed to work. A lot of times it doesn't, but it's the best thing we have. Okay, restoration is similar. Defendants may be asked to confront their behavior, the damages they caused the victim, and the shame they brought to their family, friends, and community. To restore, restoration, to restore someone back to where they were at before the offense. Easy to do if you're only talking about property damages. But if you're talking about injury, pain and suffering, how do you put a price on it? Insurance companies know how, okay? They can, and they do. But it's not fair. How do you restore? 1991, August 20th, one of the houses I used to live in blew up, burned to the ground. Water heater. It was a water heater. It was way up in the mountains. The water heater's elevated, leaked gas into the garage that was enclosed. And it leaked all night. About 4 in the morning, I get up to get in the shower. I was teaching range. So I get up to get in the shower, and I hear this, like a massive explosion rock the house. I look over the top of the curtain and the ceiling's orange. You could just see that orange glow. I know what's going on. Shut the water off, get out, make my way out into the hall, and you could just see the flames shooting from the garage. Crawled out the window, got some fire hoses, and I was trying to keep the barrier wall cool, just to contain the fire so I could get the kids out of the house. It was a nightmare. But everything I owned was in that garage. My high school yearbooks, family photos, everything that was personal to me was in that garage. Gone. So when the insurance companies settle, how are they going to pay me back for all those memories I lost? Can't. They just put a monetary dollar, $1,000 for personal belongings. Yeah, right. Nothing you can do about it. But they try to restore that loss back to where it was before the event occurred. They do the best they can. Okay, crime and punishment. Which goal of punishment do you believe is more important and why? And does it matter what the offense is? So we talked about deterrence, specific and general. We talked about rehabilitation, restitution, incapacitation. You're going to need to know those, and you're going to need to know them very well moving forward. Not only in this class, but any AJ class you take. Those terms will surface. I promise you, you're going to see them again. Deterrence. How many types are there? 2. What are they?
Specific, general.
Specific and general. Who can name another deterrent or punishment? Restitution. What else? Restoration. Incapacitation. Lock them up. Retribution, kind of with restoration, but okay. One more. Rehabilitation. Thank you. Modify behavior. Rehabilitate them so they don't go out and reoffend. That's the idea. So keep those in mind. Who has a strong opinion? Does anybody have a strong opinion of either of these types of deterrences? And if so, which one? Nobody. Gabriel, you're here, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Can you state the question again?
Out of those punishments we just talked about, which one do you believe most in? Do you align with?
I feel like the one I would be just more in line with would just be general deterrence. Just like, because if you're too specific, I feel like it won't, like, people won't really think
They don't even care, right?
for themselves, yeah. So if you make a more general deterrence, people are like, whoa, like, if I do something, let's say like a less severe crime,
Yeah.
you can still get a pretty severe punishment for
Right.
that.
I don't want that. I don't want that punishment. Okay, good. General deterrence. Let's see. Who else is here? Renee, I saw you coming. What do you think, Renee?
Just going back to Gabriel's thing, like general deterrence, like say it depends on how severe the crime is. Like,
Okay.
like say if I kill someone, then it should be more harsh than if I just like rob someone.
So you agree,
Yeah.
general deterrence. Does anybody have anything other than general deterrence and why? What do you got?
I believe in the one, the eye for an eye, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Restitution.
Yeah.
Restitution, just desserts.
Because if you offend someone, like, let's say, like, small or horribly, you should get the same amount of punishment, exactly, basically. Maybe a little more. Just to show that, like, what you did was wrong,
Yeah.
and you should understand how it was wrong and why it was wrong.
How it affected that person. Remember that judge that did the creative sentencing? Watch a couple of those clips.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the one with the pepper spray?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was a perfect example of an eye for an eye, just dessert. Because that lady walked into somewhere and sprayed the workers with real OC pepper spray. Yeah, she got it with pepper. I don't know if it was OC, but it was pepper spray. And so the judge thought, well, if you agree to go through the same pain as that person, then let's do that. That's a perfect case right there. And of course, he didn't use real pepper spray, but the offender didn't know that. And so when he sprayed it, jumped back and thought she was getting sprayed, but she wasn't. But at least she got the feeling of what she put somebody else through. That was really cool. Okay, so you get the idea, right, everybody? Yeah, yeah. I'm going to stop here because this next section, we're kind of shifting gears away from punishments into the sentence portion. There's a couple terms up there. The first two, concurrent and consecutive. You have to know what those mean. They are on the quiz, they are on the exam, you'll see them in your final. And the differences are explained up there. But yet, half of you will not remember this, and half of you will get these questions wrong. And it's an easy point for you to get. Concurrent, served at the same time. Consecutive, like a chain, one after the other, after the other, after the other. They do this when you have multiple crimes you're being found guilty of. Stacking the allegations, a complaint that lists maybe 5 or 6 different types of crimes. And if you're found guilty of, say, all 5 of them, the judge, when they impose a sentence, they're going to impose time for every criminal allegation. So you might get 5 years for the main one. A year, a year, a year, and a year. So adding them together is 9 years if served consecutively. But if your attorney argues for the sentence to be concurrent, that means you're doing the 5 years and the 1 year each at the same time. You're out in 5 instead of 9. Big difference. Okay, so think about that. We'll pick up on this slide when we leave. And let me